Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Faith Forum. Over the last few weeks, we have been really kind of dialing into the question of well-being and what exactly that entails. It's such an elusive idea. Last week, we had a chance to talk with Christine Moutier, who's the medical director for the American Foundation for the Prevention of Suicide. And that was a really important conversation about well-being generally, and obviously some of the particular challenges that people face, and how we as a community can become more aware and engaged in not only supporting people in times of mental health, but also thinking about things that we can do, as we might say, to go upstream and to build practices that help us stay grounded in the midst of pretty crazy times. I think we can all agree. Next week, we're going to have a chance to speak with Dr. Susan Golden, who's going to be coming in through live stream. She is a professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and has written a book called Stage, Not Age. And she essentially makes the argument that we do ourselves a great disservice when we think of the three phases of life as being learn, earn, and retire. That the ages of 55 to 85 and beyond can be a real season of renaissance if we think of it in those terms. But today, I have to tell you that I am beyond excited to talk with someone who, as we say, if we can inwardly mark and digest and apply the wisdom that this incredible woman has to offer us, it can truly be game-changing on our well-being and the well-being of our community. Dr. Marisa Franco is a psychologist and now a New York Times best-selling author. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes. She holds a PhD in counseling from the University of Maryland and works as a professor there currently. She writes for Psychology Today and has been a featured psychologist in the New York Times, NPR, and Good Morning America. And her focus is really on helping people understand the connection, what connection is, and the connection that we have and that we need to have a sense of belonging and a sense of well-being. I had the privilege of meeting her this past summer at a conference in Colorado. And I'll just say that while there were lots of incredible speakers, she was all the buzz. And it is a great honor, Marisa, to welcome you to Christ Church and the Faith Forum. Let's welcome her.
Thank you
So Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. And this is why we're talking today. What is the nature of friendship? Marisa, you've written this book, Platonic, How the Science of Attachment Can Help You Make and Keep Friends. When you think about friendship, and maybe we could contrast it with romantic love, What is friendship? What is the nature of friendship?
Yeah, this is a great question, and a question that's a lot more complicated than it seems. The first thing that I want to emphasize is that sometimes we view friendship as just good company. Someone whose personality we like, someone who we enjoy spending time with, right? But I actually view friendship as not just good company, but rather an investment and a commitment to another person. It's a commitment to making someone's life easier, to showing up in their hard times, to celebrating their great times, right? And I think if we have this conception of friendship as just good company, then we don't commit. We're not trustworthy, we're not reliable in the other person's life, we're not showing up in those hard times. So that's why I think that's really, really important and really, really key. I think in general throughout the book, Platonic, I'm really looking to expand our script for friendship, because I think a lot of us perceive it as this sort of relationship that is like a romantic partner with the screws missing. We don't have the same things that we have in a romantic partnership, we have something less. Whereas the original iteration of friendship, the definition was this relationship so divine that it transcended the physical body. And that, I think, is a beautiful way to perceive it, because I think each relationship has its own unique offerings to give us, right? And friendship too, platonic love too. Like, romantic love is beautiful, familial love is beautiful, and platonic love is beautiful too.
So say something about why it's so hard. I mean, we know that one of the great mental health crises of our day is, and probably has always been, is loneliness,
Yep.
isolation. I can think about growing up in my family as an only child and really kind of struggling to figure out what friendship means. And I think that so often loneliness can be self-imposed.
Yeah, so loneliness, I like to talk about it as, it's not just a feeling, it's a state of mind. When we feel lonely, it triggers certain ways of viewing the world. According to the research, people that are lonely think they're being rejected when they're not. They're more aggressive and hostile toward other people. They report having less compassion for others. They refer to themselves more in conversation. Basically, what happens when we're lonely, if you think about this from an evolutionary perspective, if you were isolated or lonely, you were alone on a savanna, and any sort of animal could attack you. So you had to be in the state of hyper alert for threat, always scanning, is someone threatening me, is someone harming me, right? And that's what actually happens when we're lonely now. We tend to look for signs of rejection, to see them when they're not there, and to react a lot more strongly and with greater hostility. And that's why, unfortunately, at a time in which we need to connect the most, our glitchy brain starts to sabotage us, and it becomes the hardest time in which to connect. It's a lot easier to connect with others when we already feel connected.
And say something about what social media and the whole concept of having friends and followers has done to our sense of connection, our sense of friendship, and our experience of friendship.
Yeah, so it's complicated because social media is a tool. And like any tool, we can use it to connect or we can use it to disconnect, right? But the way that it's designed for us to use is to just be on it, which means we're not using it as a tool to connect with people in person. And so because of that, my argument is that social media is a net negative for our connections. When we look at the data, we see in 2012, loneliness really began to spike. What was happening in 2012? The smartphone began to be more widely used. And so some of the ways that social media negatively impacts us is that, on the one hand, to experience a complex emotion like empathy or compassion, for example, your brain needs to be in a state of rest to process that emotion. And so when you're busy, when you're hurried, where you're constantly distracted, we're actually less empathic towards other people. And one study actually found that when kids' phones were taken away for a week, they actually reported being higher in empathy by the end. And then, when I say that it's a tool, what I mean is that there's this theory called displacement theory, which basically argues that when you use social media to displace your in-person interactions, you're scrolling through your phone all day, your TikTok all day for the younger generations, and you're not actually seeing people in person, you're going to be a lot more lonely. Whereas those people that actually use social media to facilitate in-person connections, for me to message you and say, hey, it's been a while since we connected, can we meet up in person? Those people are actually less lonely than people that don't have social media. So that's why it's so complicated. And if you use social media to reach out and to comment, that can actually contribute to your satisfaction in your relationships. But when you use social media in a passive way, when you're just scrolling, it contributes to your sense of loneliness, it contributes to your sense of disconnection. So it's a complicated story, the story of social media, but at the end of the day, I think the way the typical person does use technology and does use social media is a way that fosters more disconnection than connection, unfortunately.
So social media as a means by which we might connect and meet up, as opposed to this illusion that if I have all these people that are liking me, following me, whatever, that's somehow boosting my well-being. It seems like it has the absolute opposite effect.
Yeah, and I had a student that kind of put it like, when I'm just scrolling on Instagram or TikTok, that's just another form of loneliness at the end of the day. Even if it makes me feel like I'm connected to these people that I don't really know, that is the way that social media can be very dangerous, in that it fulfills at some level, very low level, a sense of connection. And so it's almost like we continue to get this snack, and we never end up getting the whole entire meal.
Wow, what a way to put it. Yeah, that's amazing. So what do you say to yourself, say to a child, a teenager, who is just completely dialed in on all the time?
Yeah. I would ask them, maybe what are they giving up? I also force my students, because I think sometimes we don't realize how much technology is affecting us, so I literally assign them to not use it for a day. I assign them to hang out with someone without their phones, and what I see from their assignments is literal conversation skills materializing before my eyes. Like, I see them say, there's a moment when it was quiet, and normally I would take out my phone, and my students describe this, ironically to me, as a way to not offend people, because then I'm able to say, I have something to do on my phone. It's not that you're uninteresting, right? And so they would take out their phones, and there's actually research that finds that simply having a phone on the table decreases the level of connection compared to people that don't have a phone on the table.
Just on the table?
Just on the table. It doesn't even have to be our phone. It's a huge trigger for us. It's a huge trigger for our brains. And so what I found with these students, which is also reflected in the research, is that in those quiet moments, they were portals to deep intimacy. When there was a pause and there was, what can I ask you to go a little bit deeper in this conversation? How can I follow up on what you want to say? And then we get a little bit more vulnerable. And then we feel a little bit more close, right? So without the crutch of the phone, they had to develop new conversation and new ways of showing interest in the other person. And the conversation was able to get more deep and more meaningful, whereas the phone was sort of a tool to derail the conversation, they began to realize.
So help us process just showing up today to this community. So everybody could have stayed home and streamed it online, or said, I'll stream it online another time, right? Talk about just the health benefits of just showing up.
Yeah. So there is research that finds that, while phone calls do increase our level of connection, while Zoom calls do, that interacting in person is just the pinnacle of connection. Like, it just makes us feel more connected than any other medium. There's this way that, there's this theory called amplification theory, which is this idea that when we're around other people, our emotions are amplified, both more positive and more negative, and that doesn't happen as much when we're communicating over technology. And for me, looking back in the pandemic, there was this sense of blahness, this sense of, it was just like a bit of a deadness that happened when I wasn't interacting with people, and then being around other people and feeling like, oh my gosh, it feels like my body is filling with life. I'm feeling so alive. And that's the sense that the physical presence of other people gives us. It's this real sense of aliveness that we experience when we can, I guess, experience the other person in a full way. I can read you non-verbally. I can sense your emotions more deeply, that we uniquely get with in-person interaction.
So I want to just kind of do a reflection with you on different kinds of friendships, because I think we have a tendency to want to bucket them all the same way. There's only one kind of friend in my mind. Say something about kind of the spectrum of different kinds of friends. You said something about good company and good friends, but not all friendships are the same.
That's true. Not all friends are good friends. And I think that's something that's beautiful about friendship, is that we get to choose the level of intimacy with a person that feels most appropriate for us. And it's not binary. It's not black or white. It's not either, kind of like I'm married to you or I'm divorced to you, right? It's with friendship we can have, you're my best friend, you're my close friend, you're my friend, you're my friendly acquaintance. And that does a lot for us. That allows us to be in community with people in unique ways, right? So I have my low dose friend, which is I love you at low doses. And that's still a friendship, right?
Yeah.
If we see each other once a month, I really do love you and I really do connect with you. And I say that too in my chapter on anger and conflict, that, sometimes when we have a conflict or an issue with the friendship, the other friend can't necessarily hear it, right? And they're not willing to see our perspective or fulfill our needs. And then we can think about salvaging. Okay, I know that this friendship can't be at the level of intimacy that I really want it to, but I can decide, what level of intimacy then do I want out of this relationship, instead of thinking to myself, this friendship simply cannot work and I need to completely expel them from my life. So I think there's this way that friendship, like I said, provides us with unique benefits that other relationships might not. And I think one of those unique benefits is just the fluidity of friendship, which I think also allows friends to come in and out of our lives in unique ways. Like throughout the lifespan, some of our closest friends will begin to ebb and flow. And if we can understand friendship as a fluid relationship, we understand that that ebb does not mean a death. That ebb can return to a flow again. And so that's why I think the ambiguity, the fluidity, it creates certain difficulties within the context of friendship, because you're like, I don't know if you're as invested in me as I am invested in you, and it's hard to develop expectations. But in this other way, it provides us with these unique opportunities.
So how do you navigate that? Because that can be can hurt, and it'd be sort of awkward. Like if we're friends and I'm your low dose friend, right? But I'm like, I sort of want to, notch up the dose a little bit.
Yeah.
Not be a best friend necessarily, but how do you navigate that? What do you do when, because I think in friendship, there's always the fear of rejection.
Yep.
Right? So say something about the fear of rejection.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think the best thing that we can do for our friendships is welcome the risk of rejection. Because if we're not willing to get rejected, we are not going to achieve intimacy. Everything that is required to achieve intimacy involves a risk of rejection. And instead, if we can affirm that rejection is part of the process to curating your company, to finding your people, to finding that community, rather than a sign that that process needs to stop, it's very, very important. I say that it's really, really important for us to understand rejection as part of the process to intimacy, rather than the time to put on the brakes and say that, I'm out, friendship isn't for me. While at the same time, I also argue that it is very important to not assume rejection when it hasn't happened. So something that I shared when we met at the Aspen Ideas Festival, do you know the person that's most likely to reject you? It's the person that fears rejection the most. Because when we are in a state of fearing rejection, according to the research, we become cold and we become withdrawn, and then we are rejecting people, and then they are rejecting us back. Whereas, one of my favorite tips for making friends is to assume that people like you, because according to the research, then something called the acceptance prophecy occurs, wherein when we think we are liked, we become friendlier, we become warmer, and we actually become more likely to be liked because of that. So there is, I guess, a sort of nuance that I'm walking here, in that rejection is part of the process to intimacy, and when it happens, our interpretation, a healthy interpretation, is that, okay, I'm proud of myself for putting myself out there. I can't control the outcome, but I can be proud of myself for my behavior. But at the same time, recognizing that I'm not going to go in with the sense that I'm going to be rejected, because then it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and let me enter into this relationship in a more optimistic way, assuming that you might like me, assuming that this might go well.
I think it's a common conception, or perhaps misconception, that you're going to make friends and this very same people are going to stay your friends forever.
Yep.
And you have said that we tend to change out 50% of our friends every 7 years.
Yep. Yeah.
That really caught me by surprise.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think in some ways this statistic is a little bit reassuring, because people are like, when they lose friends, they're like, what's wrong with me? What's going on? And it is a natural part of life that we do lose friends. And like you said, it's at high rates. Every 7 years, we tend to lose about half our friends. Caveat being, the longer you've had a friend, the more likely it is to continue. But the most common reason why we actually lose friends is because things just fizzle out. I think friendship as a relationship that we don't tend to prioritize is most vulnerable to things just sort of fizzling out. And then when things fizzle out, because our fear of rejection as one of the biggest barriers to making friends, again, in that ebb period, we assume that the friendship is over, this person's too busy, they don't want to hear from me, when in fact we know from the research that when you do reach out to someone to reconnect, they tend to value it more than you assume. So people tend to like it when you reach out to reconnect with them, but because we have this belief, this person doesn't want to hear from me, they're so busy, they've moved on with their lives, right? That fear of rejection becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy where you never reach out and you never make it happen. The other issue that I see in friendship that makes it very vulnerable is that often in friendship, we don't make the unsaid said. So imagine going through a marriage and never addressing any conflict. It would be completely impossible. But somehow people think that in friendship, it's unacceptable for us to have an issue with each other or a problem with each other. And if a problem happens, I need to push it away and get over it, or I need to leave this friendship, right? And so I talk about in my chapter on anger that when you get into a place where you're noticing yourself withdrawing from a person because of something they've done, that's a sign to engage and say, hey, I really value this friendship, which is why I want to make sure that I talk about something that's on my mind so it doesn't get between us. And so this is something that's actually been hurting me, and I was wondering what was going on you during that time. I think the message that I'm trying to share on friendship is that intimacy is intimacy. And we can't just compartmentalize the behaviors that generate intimacy with a spouse versus the behaviors that generate intimacy with a friend, right? Because just like you need to work through conflict with a spouse, you're going to have to do it at some point with a friend. Just like you need to show affection and be vulnerable with a spouse, you have to do those same behaviors with a friend. I think sometimes we have this misconception that with friendship, it should be low effort, high reward, like good vibes only. I shouldn't have to do anything, and I should just reap all the benefits of friendship. But a relationship is a relationship, whether it's platonic, whether it's romantic. You have to be intentional to keep that relationship healthy.
What do you do with the term frenemy?
Yeah. The term frenemy, it's, first of all, we have a tendency, if a friendship is both bad and good, to let it go. Like, people tend to, their bar for keeping connected to someone is that it needs to be mostly good, right? And there is some research backing for this. So ambivalent friends who are kind of like frenemies, we both like them and kind of don't like them, they actually affect our blood pressure worse than our enemies.
Really?
Because it's unpredictable. It's like really stressful to be like, I don't know if I'm going to get your loving side in this second. I don't know if I'm going to get your malicious side in this second. It's like we're letting them into our lives, into our inner circle of trust, but at the same time, they might harm us. We're not necessarily sure of the outcome. So that's why those relationships can be so tricky to navigate.
What do you do with, in your research, with stereotypes? So let's say friendships between men. What do you do with stereotypes? Friendships between men, friendships between women, friendships across difference. Are those helpful things to think about? Help me.
I think they are very helpful things to think about because I think inherent to friendship is humanizing another person.
Okay.
That friendship to me is the opposite of stereotyping because literally at the neural level, when I am friends with someone and they are harmed, the part of my brain that lights up is the same part of the brain that lights up when I am harmed. Or, you experience so much empathy with your friends at the neural level in a very natural way, which is why we find in the research that if you make a friend of a different group, you're more likely to support policies for their entire group. And not only that, but your friend is then more likely to support policies for that entire group because they see that you're friends with them. So to me, if we want to create social change, it has to happen on the backbone of human connection. And human connection is, I think, necessary but not sufficient. Other things have to happen too, but friendship and connection is a medium through which we create change. And so, I can share a story from my own life. I, was a professor at this institution and feeling like I really wanted to protect the students and, be on their side and sort of be a leader servant, that the people that I serve are the people that I prioritize rather than my own needs. And I feel like I had issues with some of the ways that we were running things. And I proposed different solutions as to how we can continue to treat the students better. And nobody would buy into my ideas. Nobody would agree with me. Nobody would second my ideas. And I thought they were good ideas. And I was like, what is the disconnect that's happening here? And I realized people decide how much to support your ideas to create change based on their relationship with you, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. So if I wanted to create social change at this institution, if I wanted to make sure the students were extra protected, I had to connect with people, because that's what would draw them in. That's what would make them to listen to what I was saying. Mm-hmm. That's what would give me the power and the sway to try to create change in this institution. So I think from the level of like systemic change, that we can't undervalue the importance of human connection.
It's we were talking on the phone, and we were talking about community, the nature of community, and community, a community of friends. And I shared with her that I think one of the things that often happens when we go to join a community, or say a church, is that maybe we think that we have to kind of come in and learn the Christ Church way and become a Christ Church member and do things as Christ Church people do things. Now, there may be, of course, an element of that in the context of our worship life and traditions and various things like that, but for us to be true community, the real question is, as we come together, as we grow, hopefully, in our diversity, the real question is, how do we change? You with me? How do we make space to learn across differences and to become more than we are as that gift? And so friendship and community, what I hear you saying is it is a critical part of becoming, and it's and these relationships, building relationships across difference, whether that be color or sexuality, nationality, religion, are essential parts of what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And I really, really like how you put it, because it indicates that by changing and growing, and relationships are one of the primary mediums through which we grow. There's a whole theory on it. It's called inclusion of others in the self, that when we include people in our sense of self, we tend to grow in particular ways, that where their experience feels like they're our experience in some ways, so we're able to empathize with them more deeply. And so, that it is a benefit for obviously people that have different backgrounds than we do, for them to feel like, oh, we can try to understand their own experience and affirm them in their own identities and not have to impose an identity onto them. This concept called identity affirmation, which is actually linked to your closest friendships enduring over time, when you're able to affirm someone in the identities they see for themselves, even if those aren't the identities that you have or the identities you choose for yourself. So for example, this is something as simple as like, my friend wants to go travel the world. I'm like, I would rather stay home with my family. I'm able to affirm that's important to you, so I am going to be really happy for you because you're fulfilling your values and you're fulfilling your goals, and so I'm going to support you. But also that does something for us, in that I am able to understand myself more deeply if I'm able to look at your differences and say, there's value here, there's opportunity here, right? Because if I'm looking at your differences and I'm saying, those are wrong, what am I ever going to learn from them? Like, if I'm saying to your differences, those are wrong, I'm almost saying in some ways, like, I'm better than you, I'm right and you're wrong, right? And when we try to connect with people, it can't happen on a hierarchy. Connection does not form on a hierarchy. We need to feel like equals in order to fully connect, because when there's a hierarchy to the relationship, I'm deciding there's parts of you that aren't right, that you can learn more from me, and you as the person who's lower down in the hierarchy don't feel like you can express your truest self. So I think when you're able to go into differences feeling like there's something to learn here, there are ways to stretch here, I'm going to come in with a sense of humility, that it can really benefit you, because within those differences you can find new ways to actualize your own self.
All right, so now we've done a survey of friendship. Now we're going to go kick it to another level. You ready? All right. So we're going to kick it to a deeper level that I think is going to invite us to think about, maybe, it certainly did for me, the work that I need to do to become a friend that has something to do with my past, but can profoundly shape my future. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. We're about to now dig into the science of friendship. And it starts with beginning to understand attachment theory. So hang with me. Can you hang with me? All right. What is attachment theory?
So as I was reading all the research on friendship, here's what I started to see as I was like finding the themes across all these different studies. It was that our personalities are fundamentally a reflection of our experiences of connection or lack thereof. So whether you are warm, vulnerable, inviting, cynical, distrusting, like all of those traits that become part of who you are reflections of your previous experiences of connection or disconnection. But not only that, those people that had those healthy relationships, they developed a set of traits or characteristics, a personality, that facilitated continued connection, right? They would assume, I can trust people. I can be vulnerable with people. People are going to like me, right? And so those are what's called securely attached people. They've had healthier early relationships, starting with their parents, evolving from there. And so they go into this relationship, their new relationships, in a secure way, with the understanding that people love me, with the understanding that, I can trust people, I can be vulnerable, that I am a lovable person. But people that are insecurely attached, their previous relationships have left them with a set of beliefs that hinder their ability to continue to form healthy relationships in the future. In some ways, their personalities become coping mechanisms so that they don't re-experience the trauma that they experienced in some of their past relationships. So you have people that are anxiously attached. Mm-hmm. People that are anxiously attached, they've learned through their past relationships that they almost need to give up their sense of selves in order to connect with people, otherwise they will be abandoned. So these anxiously attached people, consistently their inner fear is that people will abandon me. And then they have struggles in their relationships because they're seeing rejection when it's not there. Relationships issues tend to preoccupy them. They can't, it's very hard for them to move forward from things. They get into this fight or flight state, or this very reactive state, because they always feel like everything feels so high stakes, like you might leave me. Whereas then you have avoidantly attached people who have learned from their previous relationships that you just can't trust people, that they are going to leave you at the end of the day. If you're vulnerable, they are going to take advantage of you. So we see in these avoidantly attached people a fear of intimacy, a desire to keep everybody at a distance, feeling like I have to walk through this world alone, a lack of vulnerability within their friendships. And I want to affirm insecure attachment because these are coping strategies that make sense if you continue to endure relationships that are similar to the ones that made you insecurely attached. But the issue is, you're going into new relationships where something new can happen, where things can surprise you. And when you're operating off of these set of assumptions that helped create this insecure attachment style for you, then you're going to react to others in certain ways wherein they are going to fulfill your fears that you have for them. You almost begin to pull for it, right? So if you're, avoidantly attached, or let's say you're anxiously attached and you think people are always going to abandon you. So if you don't hear from a friend for a few hours, they didn't respond to your text message, you assume that they're rejecting you, and then you kind of pull back from the relationship, and then fundamentally the rejection happens, right? And so that's why I think it's really important to understand our attachment. Some people are like, hear about attachment theory and they're like, well, good for them. And I guess it sucks for me who didn't have these healthy relationships. But I like to tell people that I hope this message is actually empowering, because before you understand attachment theory, you think all of the issue is with the world, like people aren't trustworthy or people are always going to abandon you, right? And then you have no power. You have no agency if the only issue is out in the world. But when you understand how I can actually act a way to facilitate a different outcome, to experience a different reality than the reality that I always feared, then you have agency. You can change your behavior and you can find the intimacy that we all so deeply want.
So I wish, I've shared with the church that I had both, right, as a child, radical abandonment and also radical connection. But I just want to say to everybody here, this is page 37 in this book, okay? And I'm gonna go through a little bit of this.
Yeah.
Can I do this? Is that okay?
Please.
All right, because I really want you to hear it, and we have free books upstairs. And after this, you can go and get a book, and you can really look at this. Because I think it's like, I wish we did relationship education all the time. It would really help us a lot. I think that if I had read this book a long, long time ago, it would have radically changed the way that I understood myself and the friends that I have. Okay, so all right, so again, she said, one of the things that we need to do is determine our attachment style. She named 3: secure, anxious, and avoidant. And she said a lot of that can be fundamentally from something we've experienced in our childhoods or other things along the way, right? So let me just read, is this okay?
Yeah.
I know you're here, but I'm reading what you had to say.
Please.
But it's really, I got to get it out there.
I'm honored.
All right. So if we're securely attached, we're comfortable initiating new friendships. If we're anxiously attached, we fear rejection. And if we're avoidant, we're uninterested in new relationships. If we're securely attached, we bring up issues with friends level-headedly. If we're anxiously attached, we ignore issues and hope that they'll blow over. If we're avoidant, we ignore issues, minimize defects when others bring up issues. A couple more. If we're securely attached, we're comfortable admitting fault and taking responsibility. If we're anxiously attached, when we admit fault, we're overly self-critical. Anybody? We otherwise deny fault or responsibility. We see the other party as at fault. If we're avoidant, we deny fault or responsibility, and we see the other party as being at fault. 2 more. If we're securely attached, we communicate directly. If we're anxiously attached, we communicate passive-aggressively or with hostile communication. If we're avoidant, we ghost or withdraw. Last one. If we're securely attached, we trust others' love and care for them. If we're anxiously attached, we assume others really don't like or care, and we don't really like or care for them. If we're avoidant, we assume if others show they like or care for us, they have ulterior motives and are mistrusting. Anybody? Anybody? Yeah. So what do we do to try to figure out where we are on our, within ourselves? What does healing look like? I mean, maybe the first step is just to kind of know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? How do we do this reflection, this inner work? I guess it's never going to entirely go away, right?
Yeah.
But say something about how we can move forward.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's the major question of the book. I think each chapter is like, how do we become more securely attached? And fundamentally, I think if we are insecurely attached, we go into relationships feeling unsafe. So the question is, how do we repair our sense of safety in relationships? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. First, we need to cultivate relationships with people that care about us, which seems obvious, right? But actually, anxiously attached people, they have this sense that they need to earn love. So they tend to prefer relationships with people that are more avoidant and pull away from them. And if they get love more freely, they're sort of skeptical of it, right? And when people mistreat them, they work harder. They don't walk away. Whereas a securely attached person says, you're not treating me right. Let me walk away, not work harder, right? Avoidant people, they basically take themselves out of the game altogether. They're like, they don't put in a lot of effort when it comes to friends. If there's one problem, they tend to end the friendship, right? And so how can the discernment process happen of finding really good friendships when you're not even putting any effort into these friendships in general? So finding safe people, finding secure people is really, really healing for all of us, because we find these people that basically debunk our insecure misperceptions over and over and over again until we find ourselves wondering, maybe I can trust, maybe I can be vulnerable, maybe I can create connection. My other tip around assuming people like you, one way to put this into practice is that there's this psychologist that I really like. His name's Rick Hansen. His work is on how can we take in positive experiences. Our brain is so good at taking in negative experiences to protect us. So to repair your sense of social safety, he has this whole model that's called HEAL, which means you have that beneficial experience, you actually have to register it and receive it and take it in. Like when there's experiences of safety that are happening socially, you need to focus on it until it stirs a positive feeling in you. You need to picture that positive feeling sinking into your body, right? Because what can happen is, if you're so avoidantly attached, even if you were vulnerable and someone responded really lovingly, in your body, you still feel like they're judging you. And so it doesn't even matter that you're getting this information that's counter to your attachment style. But being able to actually take in and receive, oh, I shared that and they were loving, and let me actually feel that and let me actually register that. I think for a lot of insecurely attached people, and maybe this is just an existential issue of existence, it's really hard to receive love. It's really threatening to receive love. For avoidantly attached people, there's the sense that if you're showing me love, it almost requires me to admit that vulnerable part of myself that actually needs this love. And that's too exposing for me. That's too vulnerable for me. So I would rather push it away. For the anxiously attached person, there's this implicit sense of low self-esteem, that I don't actually feel like a valuable person. So when you show me love, it's threatening to me. It's an identity crisis for me, because you value me more than I feel valued internally. Now I feel all of this pressure to live up to the misperceptions that you have of me. Now I feel like you don't actually get me. You don't actually know me, because I'm not the same person that you think I am, right? So there is this struggle, I think, in general with insecure attachment style of being able to receive love from other people. But the more that we can work on actually pausing, taking in, receiving when someone's doing something loving for you, the more that your attachment can begin to repair.
So wherever we are on this spectrum, and it could be that we orient ourselves different ways at different times and different kinds of relationships.
Yes.
How do you use the term safe person? Huge. We kind of know what it feels like to be around unsafe people. How do you, as a psychologist, as a friend, determine who a safe person is? What are the qualities of a safe person?
Yeah, that's a great question. It has to do with the concept that I shared earlier called identity affirmation, which means that they're able to affirm you in your identities that you have for yourself and not impose a preconception onto you. They're able to me, loving someone is helping them express the truth of who they are in the ways that they live. And this isn't trademark me, this is bell hooks and earlier scholars. I really love this definition of love, right? And so those safe people are the people that are invested in our truth, in our authenticity, in our self-actualization, right? They're not, in some ways when we're insecurely attached, we sometimes try to use people as a tool to fulfill our own sense of self. Like we make a lot of demands on them, because if you're not this person that I need you to be, it's threatening to me. Whereas the safe person is able to allow you to be who you are and to express who you are. The safe person is also engaged in perspective taking, which is really healthy and necessary for any relationship. They understand what your perspective is, even when it differs from theirs, right? Whereas sometimes if you're insecurely attached, you're just thinking about what your needs are, and you're not thinking about the other person's needs, and how does this resonate with the other person, and how can we negotiate to find something that works for both of us. But I think fundamentally, we can also think of the safe person at the level of our nervous system. How does our nervous system feel around this person? When we're around someone who feels really safe, we find an inner sense of calm and peace. And after the interaction, we tend to feel more restored. Whereas when we're drained by someone, to me, it's a sign that we were not able to be authentic in that relationship. And inauthenticity, it's quite toxic for us. It really harms our mental health. It really harms our well-being. It's like we're constantly on edge. We're constantly hypervigilant for whether this person will receive this or not receive this. And that's why we tend to feel drained. But when we're around someone who feels really safe, we tend to feel more restored, like it's energy giving rather than energy depleting.
All right, well, we're gonna now move toward what we can do today, right? So this is all pretty deep stuff, and we're all gonna have to think about this, aren't we? And read the book and reflect. But what I also love about the book is, in addition to helping us really zero in on the heart of the matter, attachment theory, and our own experience of attachment and how that can get us on track or derail us, you also give some very practical tips for making friends.
Yep.
One comment before we do this: we see kids making friends and also struggling to make friends. Could you say something about what you would say to parents about helping their kids make friends? And then secondly, talk to me about making friends as adults when you've just maybe moved into a new town, or 50% of your friends just left you and you're ready to roll with some new folks. Yeah. What would you say to a parent who's saying, my son or my daughter doesn't have friends?
Yeah. So I met this woman who was really good at making friends, and I was like, what is your secret? How did you get so good at making friends? Because for me, I had to study this stuff to know how to do it. It was not something that came now. I had to write a book on this to understand how to make friends. It wasn't something that comes automatically. So when I find those people where they're just like, it's very easy for them, I'm just like, fascinating, like, tell me more. So when I did this with her, she was like, well, my mother always told me, everybody wants to be your friend. They're just looking for you to initiate. So she felt so free to just initiate with other people. And it worked, right? And so I guess what her mom was telling her was to assume people like you, in so many words. But the other thing that I would suggest for parents is that, according to the sociologist Rebecca Adams, friendship happens more organically when you have a few ingredients in place. Repeated, unplanned interaction, so you see someone regularly, even though it's not necessarily planned, and shared vulnerability. So that's like school, right? We have gym, we have recess, right? And you have your extracurriculars. So that friendship tends to happen a little bit more organically for us as kids. So the more that you can encourage your child to find themselves in circumstances that offer repeated unplanned interaction and shared vulnerability, the more likely it is that they'll make friends. So can they join a sport that they really like, or a hobby or interest that they really like, theater, like anything, encouraging them to do that, because that'll do something really important for them socially as well. But that takes me to the points that I want to make as making friends as adults, is that as adults, a lot of us, if we're not seeking it out intentionally, might not have repeated unplanned interaction and shared vulnerability. Like, we see our colleagues every day at work, but are we actually vulnerable with them? A lot of the times we're only showing one kind of work side of ourselves, so we don't actually end up feeling very close to them. I think coming to church is great because it can offer you that sort of infrastructure for making connections. But outside of that, outside of the things we opt into, what that means is that in adulthood, friendship doesn't happen organically. It just doesn't. And in fact, according to the research, people that think it does are more lonely over time. And people that think it takes effort are less lonely because they make that effort. They show up. They try to engage with people. So I wanted to share, I know we're sort of closing up, a story of the research and how I ended up putting it into practice. So I go to Mexico City. It's a solo trip. I'm like, I'm here for 10 days. I cannot be alone for 10 days. I will be very, very lonely. So I have to meet people. And I know it's not going to happen organically. I know I'm going to have to try. What I also know from the research, people are less likely to reject me than I think they are. So this is based on something called the liking gap, which finds that when strangers interact, they underestimate how liked they are by each other. So we all think people are more likely to reject us than they actually are. I also know from the research that transitioners are more open to friendship. So someone who's traveling, just moved to a city, just started school, just got out of a relationship, right, retired, all of those types of people are very open to connection. So I'm sitting at this coffee shop, hear this guy speaking American English. I'm like, transitioner, yes. And I'm like, oh, hey, like, where are you from? I'm from the US too. And we start talking, and I end up inviting him to this language event that I was planning on going to later. And he says yes. And so at that language event, I end up meeting more people that are cool, and I get their contact information, and I ask them to go to this wrestling match with me. I know from the research too, lucha libre.
Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah.
I know from the research too that what makes you likable, I always thought it was being like charismatic and funny and insightful and or smart. And so I would put a lot of pressure on myself and feel like I needed to, be some kind of perfect person to be likable. But now I know that from the research that people actually like people that they think like them. So the more that you are friendly and warm towards people, the more that likely they are to want to hang out with you and want to engage with you, and making connections is about how you treat people. It's not necessarily about your own personality. Any personality can make connections. It's more about, do you make other people feel loved? Do you make other people feel like they belong? That's what's going to create that connection. I also created more repeated unplanned interaction for myself. I joined a Spanish class every day. So with my friends in the Spanish class, I invited them to lunch after class. And by the end of that trip, we had like 10 people come into Lucha Libre together. And I was like, oh my gosh. In some ways, it's like wild to me, because before I wrote this book, it was so stressful. And I was like, how do you make friends? I have no idea. But now after writing about it, I'm like, wow, it's so much easier than I thought. You just have to ask, and people are so open to it. And sometimes I think we have this sense that like everybody already has their friends. But what we know from the data is that we're lonelier than we've ever been. People do not have their friends. Like the more typical person is the one who is craving more connection rather than the person that's lonely. So people are going to be more open to you than you think, and you have to initiate, and you have to just be able to say, I'd love to connect with you. Could we exchange contact information and follow up?
So I grew up watching wrestling. And so the next time you're in town, could we go to a wrestling match together? Okay, that would be awesome. Well, this is something we wrestle with, isn't it? This friendship business. Yeah. How about that transition? Yeah, George, I'm getting better in my old age. Yeah. So, isn't it nice to have a doctor in the house? Yeah. And we get to not just wrestle, but we get to keep thinking about this and talking about this. And I hope and pray that you will find this to be a community of connection. For those that are live streaming, if you're in town, please come. And what we're going to be doing is looking for more and more ways that we can create places to connect conversations, events, and experiences. Because certainly here, we don't want anyone to be lonely. We want you to enjoy your solitude, but we don't want you to feel lonely. Jesus said, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. Let that be our aspiration, our hope, and our dream, that we can be and find deep, lasting, life-giving friendship across all of our differences in a world so divided. May we find a common unity in love. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.